Welcome back into the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap, presented by Full Press Coverage. We had a couple of conference finals games over the weekend, Sap, as I know you and I both watched intently. So what we're going to do is just quickly recap those games just to make sure everybody's on the same page of where the series are at. We're also going to talk about some rumors in the NBA today surrounding some trades, some new coaching hirings, as we predicted was going to happen over the weekend. So plenty to talk about on today's Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap. The first thing I want to say, Sap, is to you. I saw that you put out a Dame Lillard question, and we're going to talk about a potential Dame Lillard trade in a little bit. I see that you and Chris, who also does some stuff for Full Press Coverage, are on the same page, and I'm wondering if there's some backstage colluding going on. Are you trying to jump ship to do a different podcast? Am I not good enough for you anymore, Sap?
I wouldn't say that, Jet, but I can be all things to all people. And actually, Chris Party, who does a great job on his podcast, I was a guest on his podcast a couple weeks ago. I know he's going to reach out to you to join him as well. He lives in Portland, although he's a Pacers fan because his favorite player growing up was Reggie Miller. No colluding. I am all things to all people, Jet. You know that better than anyone else. But I just thought it'd be an interesting poll to put out there. Would you trade Jaylen Brown, Marcus Smart, and a first-round pick for Dame Lillard if you're the Boston Celtics? And just let us know at JohnSap25.
Yeah, check out Sap's Twitter. He always has great polls there. And before we talk about Dame Lillard, you can ruminate about that question if you're listening to the podcast at home or in your car or at work, wherever. And we're going to get to Dame Lillard in a little bit. But first, let's talk about the games that happened over the weekend, Sap. On Saturday, we had the Clippers and the Suns playing a very interesting game that was reminiscent of basketball before the advent of the shot clock. The final score was 80-84, with the Suns pulling ahead now 3-1. This was just a weird game when you see a score this low, Sap. Paul George was really good, but he was really bad shooting. Like his numbers look really good, I should say, but his efficiency was terrible. On the side for Phoenix, who ended up winning the game, the same could be said about Devin Booker. His numbers at the end looked pretty good, but his efficiency wasn't that good. Chris Paul, the same way. Deandre Ayton continues to be the best player for Phoenix in this series. And he's getting, a lot of hype. People comparing him to David Robinson, which he does look a little bit like David Robinson, but I think that's getting a little bit carried away.
I went more with Robert Parrish. I
saw that you're saying that. I like that.
I like that one because, David Robinson is a slightly higher level than Robert Parrish. So before we start comparing anybody to David Robinson, we can go to Robert Parrish. But Parrish had a phenomenal career, Hall of Famer, part of the Big Three, incredibly durable. He was kind of I wouldn't say the forgotten guy in those Celtics teams, but he was the most overlooked because he was a quiet guy.
The clear third best player of their Big Three.
He may have been the second best player, Jet. You
nah,
have
this debate about
McHale. Well, okay, that's debatable. That really is debatable. I know that Parrish got a lot of MVP votes in his time in Boston, as did McHale a little bit later on. But what made it work, though, was there was a pecking order. Bird was clearly the alpha on those teams. And then McHale and Parrish on a given night were comfortable being the second or third guy. But I think people kind of forgot how good Robert Parrish was with the Boston Celtics. And if Deandre Ayton turns out to be Robert Parrish, the Phoenix Suns are going to have a nice run here for the next several years with Devin Booker, and depending on how long Chris Paul can play at a high level. But I love the player because he does the classical things that you want a center to do. He's a rim protector. He rebounds. He scores inside, sets picks. He's not trying to be someone that he's not. With Joel Embiid, who's more gifted than Deandre Ayton, sometimes kind of loses focus and decides he wants to be a guard, take three-point shots, lead the break, constantly falling down, constantly getting injured. This guy Deandre Ayton's more durable and seems more focused. I was so impressed with him walking into the arena before Game 4 of the Western Conference Finals. He's wearing a shirt with Devin Booker's face on it. Yeah. I thought that was pretty cool. I really did. I look at a lot of teams and say, I wonder if Jason Tatum would walk into the building wearing a shirt with Jaylen Brown's face on it. I doubt it because Jason Tatum's more into himself than, say, Deandre Ayton is. And whatever Chris Paul is selling there, along with head coach Monty Williams, Booker and Deandre Ayton, their two young superstars, are buying into it, and that's why they're one game away from going to the NBA Finals for the first time in that franchise's history since 1993.
Yeah, and Ayton was probably the only, him and Zubac were the only two efficient players on the court the entire game, and both played really, really well. Zubac played 40 minutes, and Ayton played 41. You don't really see the centers getting that much burn in the NBA anymore.
It felt like the 90s, didn't it? That whole game felt like the 90s. They couldn't even reach the 90s. It was 84-80.
They did not. And Ayton finished with 19 points and 4 blocks and a whopping 22 rebounds.
Yeah, he's good.
Zubac, to his credit, 13 and 14. He had a very good game considering he's, not the skill set of DeAndre Ayton, but very solid player, and he's been pretty good in these playoffs.
Yeah, too bad the Lakers traded him 2 years ago to the Clippers of all places. For nothing. It was a dumb move. We said it at the time, Jen. I was like,
for a dumb franchise, Sep. They're a dumb franchise that falls ass backwards into great players.
Yeah, they get great players, and then they get that second player, and then that great player follows through on the promise, and they win championships.
So frustrating. It's so frustrating.
Oh, shit on the Lakers, because, Jet, since 1986, I don't think the Celtics have been the most well-run organization either. So,
but better than the Lakers.
Let's not go there. Well, who's got more titles? I mean, that's not even a discussion. But yeah, I mean, they did the best move the Lakers ever made since the 80s, when the Lakers and Celtics were obviously the two dominant teams, and the NBA was trading for Kobe Bryant on draft night, right? I mean, that is a great trade. So that isn't like they fell ass over backwards to Kobe Bryant. Jerry West had picked him out, and we know Charlotte drafted him, and then they traded Kobe Bryant to the Lakers for
Vlade Divac.
Vlade Divac, who was probably the last guy in the NBA who still smoked cigarettes while he was playing. So that's a great move. And then, you were able to get Shaq there, and then you made a good trade to get Paul Gasol. So, I mean, they're not the best-run organization. It's not the Spurs where they draft, develop, and create, a monster, or even Golden State to a sense, who, drafted and developed Steph Curry, Draymond Green, and Klay Thompson.
Well, Sap, look at this iteration of the Lakers. This is the epitome of falling ass backwards into a good team. I mean, LeBron signed there purely because it was in Los Angeles, not because they had any. I mean, they were horrible for years before LeBron joined them.
Yeah,
and then Anthony Davis said, "I won't go anywhere but LA." So I mean, that's falling ass backwards into two great players.
Absolutely, but you know what? If that happened with the Celtics, you'd applaud.
I'd be happy, but I mean, if Anthony Davis calling a spade, Sep.
If Anthony Davis said in the summer of 2019, I only want to go join Kyrie Irving in Boston because Kyrie signed a long-term deal with the Celtics, and I want to play with Kyrie Irving, you and the rest of the Green Teamers would be applauding. So,
yeah, but then he would have fundamentally not understood what playing with Kyrie Irving means. I would say that Anthony Davis, you're in for a real headache. But anyway, so the Suns go up 3-1 now, Sap. This game was clearly about Ayton holding down the fort in just an ugly slugfest. And for as far as the Clippers go, George, he has so much weight on him. I can almost forgive the inefficiency because I mean, he's the only guy that the Suns are keying in on defensively.
Right.
But he got virtually no help. I mean, Reggie Jackson helped a little bit, but incredibly inefficiently. And if your second guy is not efficient, then you're really not going to win games.
Yeah, and they didn't shoot well from the free throw line. They did intentionally miss a couple towards the end, but they were 21 of 32 from the free throw line. That's 66%. That's the best free throw shooting team in the league. The Clippers were this year, and the Suns were second. The Suns hit their free throws. That may have been the only difference in that game. Jet, in the fourth quarter, the two teams combined to go 7 of 38 from the floor. It was just painful to watch. I mean, Khris Middleton last night scored more points in the fourth quarter than either Phoenix or the Clippers did in that fourth quarter. So it was tough to watch. It was good defense because both teams do have a defensive DNA, but guys just couldn't make shots. I think people got tight. And look at the games 3 and 4 in L.A. Devin Booker, who's playing with a broken nose, and at some point in Game 4, he took the mask off and he's having difficulty dealing with that as well. And Chris Paul, who, is coming back from whatever COVID-related issues. Those two guys in those two games, 24 of 84 from the floor, 29%. And somehow Phoenix won one of those games, which is really what they needed to do to really take hold of this series.
Yeah, that's why having a big three is so important because, I mean, it happens where you have two guys off on the same night. It's very rare to have 3 really good players off on the same night. That's why I thought the Nets were going to just roll through everybody, but they obviously got hurt. And I think that if they're healthy next year, they still will roll through everybody, because just especially when you're talking about that level of talent, the odds of having all three guys off on the same night are astronomically low. Two guys, it can happen. You saw it happen the other night with the Suns, but then Ayton had, this is statistically one of the best games of his career. I mean, 18 and 4 blocks and 22 rebounds. I mean, that's fantastic in a playoff game.
It really is. And back to Paul George, I think he right now is mentally and physically exhausted. I mean, he had to play the final 2 games against Utah and 4 games so far in the Western Conference Finals without Kawhi Leonard, the best player on the Clippers, not playing the last 6 games. That's put a lot of pressure on Paul George. Paul George is better suited to be a 2, not a 1. He's clearly a Robin, not a Batman. Kawhi.
Yeah, and the rest of the guys are role players. I mean, they're all role players.
Yeah, you're asking Reggie Jackson and Pat Beverly and Marcus Morris Sr. to, go out and, be borderline all-stars, and they're really not that. So I think there's a lot of pressure on Paul George. And look, this series could be 3-1 Clippers very easily. I mean, if it's his free throws in game 2 and they make a few free throws in game 4, the series is 3-1 the other way. So that's how close it's been. But give Phoenix credit for closing it out. And again, a lot of that has to do with Chris Paul, who didn't shoot well in the fourth quarter. He missed shots that he normally makes, but he did hit most of his free throws. I think he only missed 1 free throw the entire game. Booker was 9 of 11 from the free throw line. So that was pretty much the only difference between the two teams. It was ugly basketball. For people that love to talk about how great basketball was in the 90s, well, that's what the 90s somewhat looked like. I didn't find it that engaging. The 80s, which people somehow think was the most physical decade ever and great defense, the 80s, the average score was the same as it is now. Go back to the 80s finals between the Lakers and Celtics. High-scoring games because both teams could run. They had a lot of firepower. Defenses weren't as sophisticated as they are now. The shooters now are better, so they stretch the floor. So, yeah, that was definitely right out of the 90s the other night. And, it was a tough watch, but I'm rooting for Phoenix, so I was happy they won, and now they're 1 game away from the finals.
Yeah, it definitely it wasn't aesthetically pleasing. I do like the defensive stuff. Occasionally, it's I don't want it every game, so I didn't mind this so much for 1 game. It matters to me a lot more if the game is close than if it's aesthetically pleasing. That's what matters to me the most, is if the game is competitive. And this one was, I mean, pretty much throughout. So I enjoyed it, but you're right that it could be completely 3-1 the other way around, which is interesting. And Phoenix may very well wrap this thing up tonight, Sap, and it will look like it was a blowout of a series 4-1, when really it's been pretty neck and neck, especially considering Kawhi Leonard hasn't played at all. So I saw a lot of people talking at the beginning of this series and even after game 1, saying, oh man, whoever wins out of these 2 teams, I mean, that's the clear favorite in the finals. And I think with all these 4 teams remaining, there's clear flaws to all of them. And I don't think if Phoenix wins tonight, that you could say they're the prohibitive favorites over the Bucks or the Hawks or whoever gets there. We'll talk about the Bucks and Hawks in just a second here. It's as wide open as I can ever remember it being.
I mean, Milwaukee's second best player is Khris Middleton. Now, he was brilliant in game 3 of the Eastern Conference Finals. He was god-awful in the first 2 games of that series, right? We know that Drew Holiday was really good in game 1 of the conference finals and hasn't been all that good the last 2 games. So if those are your second and third best players, then how much of a powerhouse are you? You may be the best team left. And I think you can kind of make a case that Milwaukee is, because of their size and the fact that Giannis, even though he's a flawed player, he's generally going to give you 30 and 13 pretty much every night, by hook or by crook, just on his sheer determination, athleticism, his heart, his will to win. So, yeah, there's no great teams here. There's no great teams in the NBA right now. I mean, the last great team we saw in the NBA was Golden State when Durant was with Klay Thompson and Steph Curry and Draymond Green. And even they, in a couple of those playoff runs, it was a little back and forth. I mean, we remember the Western Conference Finals in 2018 against Houston. Houston was up 3-2, but then Chris Paul had a hamstring issue and couldn't play in game 6 or 7. A healthy Chris Paul probably beats Golden State in that Western Conference Finals. And Durant's first year in Golden State, a great team, obviously, but, game 1 of the Western Conference Finals, the Spurs have a 22-point lead, and Zaza Pachulia does a cheap shot on Kawhi Leonard, knocks Kawhi out of that series. Who knows what would have happened there? So, I really always think that the last dominant team that we've seen is probably the 2001 Lakers, in terms of they went, 15-1 in the postseason. They just obliterated teams. That's a true dominant team. I don't see any of these 4 teams maybe sweeping the NBA Finals unless Atlanta sneaks in and then they got nothing left, or if the Clippers somehow come back, may have nothing left, but maybe they'll have Kawhi Leonard back, although most reports are Kawhi's done for the year. Then factor in the injuries, right? There's really no healthy team at this point now that you've got Trae Young with an ankle issue. Milwaukee's the healthiest of the teams. Phoenix.
And they're missing a starter,
Yeah, and Dante DiVincenzo, who, I think is a nice role player. Phoenix, you got Chris Paul coming off the COVID restrictions, and you got Devin Booker playing with a broken nose.
And Cam
playing
Payne
with a broken nose
right.
has to be a problem. He's not right either. He's got the best name in the NBA, doesn't he? Cam Payne.
It's a good name.
That's awesome. Great name. Love his name.
Be a pitcher. I like pitchers. Sometimes have great names like that.
Cam Payne.
So all right, let's switch gears, Sap, here and go to the Eastern Conference Finals, where Milwaukee was able to take Game 3 last night, 113-102. It was actually a closer game than that. Most of the times we say, the finals, it didn't indicate how much of a blowout it was. This actually was a closer game than 102-113. Just the foul game at the end there changed it a little bit. Milwaukee made a really late run to make the score look different than it actually was. Trae Young got hurt in just a freak injury where he stepped on the referee on the sideline. They're calling it an ankle bruise. I'm assuming he's going to be good to go for Game 4, but it clearly affected him. The bigger problem for the Hawks was that, really, he was the only one providing offense, with the exception of Danilo Gallinari, who was nice with 18 points off the bench. But basically, it came down to this. Giannis got a lot of help from Khris Middleton, who was arguably the best player in the court, probably the best player in the court last night, Khris Middleton, and Trae Young didn't get a lot of help from his co-stars. So the Bucks end up winning. I think it's almost as simple as that. I'm curious as to what your takes are. And Sap, I also want to address something that Kendrick Perkins said after the game, after I get your take.
Yeah, obviously you look at Giannis and Khris Middleton last night combined for 71 points, 22 rebounds. The Bucks aren't going to lose when those two guys put up those types of numbers. Drew Holiday had double-digit assists, but he didn't really score much and didn't necessarily have to score much. And then they kind of fill in the gaps. I think Mike Budenholzer's made the right move by going to Bobby Portis a lot more. He gives him a lot more versatility than Brook Lopez. Should have done it late in the Brooklyn series. For some reason, he didn't, but he's done it in this Atlanta series, and I think that's a smart move by Coach Budenholzer. The other guys from Atlanta didn't show up. Game 1, you got great performances from Clint Capella and John Collins, and you won, but you won barely. That's the type of effort that Atlanta's going to need to beat Milwaukee, is have all 3 of their players, those being their 3 best players, play at a very, very high level. Because after that, Bogdanovich is playing with a bad knee, and he's really not contributing all that much. Herter's a nice player who had a big game against the 76ers, but that was against Seth Curry, who really can't play defense, and they seeked him out in that big comeback by the Hawks. So, we'll see what happens with Trae Young. A small guy like that who's 6 feet relies on quickness, dealing with an ankle injury, whether it's a sprain, a strain, a bruise, whatever the case may be, that is going to hinder him at some point. Because I know we like to compare Trae to Steph Curry. Trae scores more in the lane than he does on the perimeter. He's a good three-point shooter, but not a great three-point shooter. He's an elite passer. And when he gets into the lane, those floaters, those teardrops are just incredible to watch and almost impossible to defend. So that's going to be obviously very interesting. And again, there's not a lot of time between games. It's like game, day off, game. So he's going to have to recover quick. But he's a young player. He's not a huge guy, so he has that going for him.
Yeah, in a way, it's almost like as Khris Middleton goes, the Bucks go. And I know Kendrick Perkins said that Khris Middleton's the Batman of this team and that Giannis is the Robin. I could think that's, as much as I love Perk, I still think that's ridiculous. I don't. Batman can't be the guy who's wildly inconsistent, and Middleton is wildly inconsistent. When he's good, he's real good. Like last night, he was phenomenal. But Batman can't be, getting shot in the head by the Joker one day and, the next day capturing the guy. Batman needs to be consistent. Giannis, as much as his game sometimes gets dissected and criticized a lot, he has been the model of consistency in this playoff, Sap. He is putting up, like you said, like clockwork, 30 and 13, 5 or 6 assists, no problem. Every night he's giving you that.
Yeah, I think they don't really have a Batman, and maybe we're going to see this year a team win an NBA championship without a Batman, that they could win with two Robins. Khris Middleton's too inconsistent to be Batman. You're right. I disagree with Perk on that. Middleton, when he's on, looks like a poor man's Kevin Durant because he does a lot of really nice things out there besides score. I mean, he's a decent rebounder, a good facilitator, solid defender. Obviously, he's not Kevin Durant, but you get my point. A poor man's Kevin Durant. That's at his best, but there are games where he is, I wouldn't say a no-show, but he doesn't really contribute. Giannis is more consistent, but you really don't have Giannis as a closer. He's not necessarily a closer for you because he's not great at the free throw line. His offensive game is somewhat limited, right? I mean, he's not going to go hit three-pointers. His mid-range game is spotty at best, but he is wildly consistent. Look, I've compared him to Karl Malone, and Karl Malone is a top 20 player in the history of the league. I think wildly overrated. I'm not a big Karl Malone fan, but I'll give the man his due. He was consistent. He was durable. That's kind of the feeling I get off with Giannis. Now, Karl Malone may have won 2 titles if not for Michael Jordan. Right now in the playoffs, there's no Michael Jordan. The only guy close to Michael Jordan, who I think is actually better than Michael Jordan, got eliminated in the first round. So I think you can win without a Batman in these playoffs. I mean, right now, does Phoenix really have a Batman? I mean, Chris Paul is the brains of the operation. Booker's playing with a broken nose, and Deandre Ayton's a center. So this is why this kind of feels like 70s basketball in a sense. You know, when the Supersonics won a title with Gus Williams and Dennis Johnson in the backcourt, I mean, that was an excellent backcourt, but it's nothing like the Splash Brothers, I think, which has made these playoffs really interesting.
And Sap, you know, you talk a lot about how LeBron's the most dissected athlete of all time, and I agree with you. He is. I think him and Tom Brady are the two guys that you could look at, and probably LeBron more so. I agree with you there. I think Giannis's game might be the most overly dissected game in the NBA. I mean, I just listen. I love the player. I think he's great, and I think people are too critical of him sometimes. I just don't know what more you want from a star player than to literally consistently average 60% from the floor, 30 plus points a game, 11 rebounds, really good defense, 5 to 6 assists. And I don't know what more people are expecting out of him. And for Perkins to say he's Robin, that just seems disingenuous. He's putting up the numbers consistently that a star player should put up. He's not putting up Paul George-esque 4-point stinker games. It's just where he's shooting wildly inefficiently from the floor. I think his game is just so over dissected. Appreciate it for what it is. There's some things he can't do, but he is so consistent with what he does do. He doesn't have nights where the things that he does well, suddenly those things fall apart. Those are always there.
Yeah, he doesn't give you 11.7 rebounds one night unless he gets hurt or is in foul trouble. Again, you know, Bill Simmons will always use that, you know, a 90-10 guy. Like, we don't spend any time talking about the 90% of what they do. We talk about the 10%, what they don't do. That's the case here with Giannis. Like, the 90% that he does is phenomenal. It's all-time great. The 10% he doesn't do, that's what gets dissected. LeBron's dissected, so there's like 5% of LeBron's game that people have some sort of issue with. He's not a great free throw shooter. People don't think he's a closer, although he's had more game-winning shots in the postseason than Kobe Bryant and Michael Jordan combined. I'm not a LeBron guy. I hate that argument. I've seen him do it to the Celtics too many times to say he's not a closer.
A lot.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, look, Magic Johnson faced that. And the funny thing is because Magic started to hit some big shots later in his career, the junior skyhook against the Celtics in Game 4 of the 87 finals. Then all of a sudden, Magic became a great closer. But people seem to forget Magic in the 84 finals. He choked. I mean, I was at those games. He played horrible down the stretch of all those key games. He played almost as badly, if not as badly, as LeBron did in the 2011 finals. But Magic was never dissected the way LeBron is, because Magic was eminently likable by everybody, where LeBron, he can put people off because he's more opinionated. He's certainly more polarizing than Magic.
Well, Steph, I think it's two things with LeBron, and we're getting slightly off track here, but
always good to talk about him, though.
I know that we'll rein it back in a second. Here's my issue with again, I hate doing this because I'm not the LeBron guy that you are. I still think Jordan's the best player ever, but I can't just blindly not acknowledge greatness. Here's my problem with the non-closer argument. Two things. One, he is a closer. I've seen him hit big shots at the end of games more times than I can count. I've seen it with my own eyes. I've seen it in person. I've seen it on TV. That's just a fact. That's a fact. Second, if we're going to use a baseball analogy here, let's say that a pitcher goes 8 innings, has 13 strikeouts, allows 1 run, but then, Mariano Rivera, the closer, comes in and strikes out the side. Are you giving more credit to Mariano Rivera or to the starting pitcher who got you in position to win the game? You win 2-1, but still, if the pitcher doesn't go 8 innings and give you all that stuff, it's like LeBron will go, 3 and 3/4 of a game, score 50, have 10 assists, 11 rebounds, and you say, but Kyrie hits the shot, and you're like, LeBron can't close. Well, does it really matter? He got you in position to win.
Wouldn't even been a game if he wasn't on the court.
That's why I feel like
45 minutes.
It's such a disingenuous argument. Like, is really hitting that one big shot at the end of the game more important than the 45 points he poured in over the rest of the game? All those points matter just as much. So that's why I don't like the argument. It's silly.
After the 2016 finals, Skip Bayless would come out and say, LeBron needed Kyrie Irving. Jordan never needed a Kyrie Irving to win a finals. And I'm like, 1993, Game 6, John Paxson hit the game-winning shot to beat the Phoenix Suns. And then in one of the 2 series against Utah in the finals, I remember Steve Kerr hitting a game-winning shot from the foul line. It's like Jordan didn't take and make every single big shot in all of those series because it's a team game, and we know LeBron always makes the right basketball move.
Purely a basketball thing. Like, Sep, if Russell Wilson had driven the ball down the field, and actually handed the ball off to Marshawn Lynch at the 1, and Marshawn Lynch ran it in for a touchdown, won the game, would people have been saying, Russell Wilson can't close, he had to give the ball to Marshawn Lynch? No! Say he drove the ball down the field, he put them in position to win the game. He did a great job. He was clutch. For some reason in basketball, there's like a disconnect. If the guy gets you, 9/10 of the way there and one guy hits a shot and contributes to 1/10 of the win, for some reason he's getting more credit. That just never tracks with me.
No. I'll go deeper to Tom Brady. His first 2 Super Bowl wins, he got the ball, tie game, drove his team down the field. Adam Vinatieri kicks the game-winning field goal. Does that diminish what Tom Brady did? No, they needed a field goal to win. He got them within range to kick the field goal, which won.
No, it's crapping on Brady and saying, he needed Adam Vinatieri.
Rob Parker is, because he's the load, according to Rob Parker, as Brady won his 7th Super Bowl at 143 years old. I get all that. But the point being here is that these teams that are out there don't have a natural closer. Look, even if Kawhi was healthy, I don't really think Kawhi's a great closer. Dame Lillard, I think of as a great closer.
Here's why I think
Durant's a great closer, but Durant also went 0 for 6 in overtime of Game 7. I'm not going to hold that against them.
Great closers are jump shooters, Sap, right? Are really good mid-range.
They tend to be,
and guys who get to the free throw line.
I mean, it's tough to have Shaq as the closer because he's got to get position down low. He is unstoppable. If he gets fouled, he's got to go hit free throws. You think of Jordan and Kobe, and I think Jordan and Kobe, as great as they were, are slightly overrated as closers because they missed more than they made.
I think the guys who are the elite closers in the league are guys who can create their own shot, hit from the mid-range, and get to the free throw line and hit your free throws. So those 4 things. Yeah. James Harden, one of the best closers in the game because he can do all those things. I hate watching him play. It's not aesthetically pleasing, but I mean, he can close out a basketball game, period. LeBron James can do all those things. Listen, he's not a 90% free throw shooter, but he can close out a game at the free throw line occasionally. He's not.
I don't think they've ever lost a big game because of his free throw shooting.
He's not Ben Simmons.
No. But I'm not even Ben Simmons, and I can't even see the rim.
To recap this whole thing, I do think Giannis's game is completely overanalyzed. I will take the consistent 60% from the floor, 30-plus points, 10-plus rebounds, a block or 2, 5-plus assists in a game. He's getting them in position to win a game. I don't care that it's Khris Middleton hitting the big shot at the end of the game.
Right.
I will take the guy that's putting me in position to win the game. Middleton, you cannot be as inconsistent as he is and be Batman. No. So as much as I love Perk, I feel like Perk is not a big Giannis guy. I feel like he's overanalyzing Giannis's game.
Which I think we've all done, because Giannis does have flaws in his game, but let's appreciate 90% of his game, which is absolutely awesome. He feels like the most dominant big since Shaquille. And I still qualify him as a big. He's not a real great perimeter shooter, not a great free throw shooter. Most of his baskets come within 3 or 4 feet of the basket, so he's a big. Appreciate that.
What's Perk expecting him to start knocking down threes? Well, then he's Kevin Durant if he starts hitting threes consistently.
Right. I mean, that's a unicorn, and I don't want Giannis taking threes. Like, the last thing I want if I'm a Bucks fan is Giannis taking threes. That's not helping anybody. Let Khris Middleton take them. Yeah, but they can win the title without a true Batman, whatever you want to call that. because right now they're up 2-1, and I think they're in control now of that series because of Trae Young's injury. But, Philadelphia was also up 2-1 against Atlanta. Then they got up 18 in Game 4 and blew that, got up 26 in Game 5 and blew that. I think Milwaukee's better constructed to at least hold on to games better than Philadelphia was.
Milwaukee, we talked about this in the regular season, is really well constructed defensively. They don't have a Seth Curry, who is a very good player, but it can be hunted out defensively. There's nobody in Milwaukee who can really hunt out one-on-one defensively. These are all, I'd say, above average to elite. Obviously, Drew Holiday and Giannis are elite defensively. I'd say PJ Tucker is close to that level. He's very, very good defensively. Lopez, for his position, is pretty good defensively. Middleton is above average defensively. And then the guys they have coming off the bench, Connaughton's good defensively. Portis is good defensively. And that's basically their rotation. They have a pretty tight 7 to 8 man rotation.
Yep. And that's with Dante DiVincenzo out, who was also a pretty good defender. That's their makeup is defense. So is Philadelphia's, but when they had Seth Curry on the court, because they needed his offense, teams would hunt him out and score against him. There was something else that Perkins said that you wanted to talk about?
No, that was pretty much it. Sap was
wasn't
talking about
it? Wasn't it him saying that he would take Trae Young over Luka Doncic to start a franchise?
I didn't even see that he said that. But that's dumb.
That's Perk. I mean, I love Perk, but Perk's on there to say things, and he was co-hosting First Take, and he was talking to, I think it was one of the football guys was filling in because everybody's on vacation this week, and he said he'd take Trae Young over Luka because Trae's teammates love him, and he's not sure if Luka's teammates love him, and Luka got the coach fired and all that stuff. If I look at the two players, the skill sets are both pretty amazing. They both suck on defense, so we can forget about that. But Luka's also 6-7 inches taller. When in doubt, I'll go with size.
Yeah, I mean, I'd take Luka for sure. Also, I mean, I think Trae Young was criminally underrated earlier in the season, and I don't think he's getting overrated now, unless you're Perkins and taking over Luka Doncic. But now I think he's getting more properly rated as one of the best young players in the league, which he is.
Hell yeah.
People are getting a little bit carried away now with this draft class because these guys are shining. With Ayton, Young, and Doncic are all shining. I'm seeing a lot of people now comparing it to the 86 draft with Jordan. 84 draft with Jordan,
86
Hakeem,
had
and
someone
Barkley.
Die 2 days after the draft. So
no, that,
I don't know if any player wants to be compared to that draft. No.
So people are saying, okay, Luka is the Jordan of this draft. Ayton is the Hakeem of this draft, and Trae Young is the Barkley of this draft. Well, I mean, first of all,
let's calm down.
As great as Luka is, I don't think he's going to reach Michael Jordan heights. I mean, that's a bit of an unfair ask. Hakeem Olajuwon, one of the greatest centers of all time, much more skilled, I think, than Ayton. Ayton is skilled, but not Hakeem Olajuwon skilled. And, Charles Barkley is in the Hall of Fame, and one of the greatest power forwards, one of the greatest forwards of all time. Trae Young still has a ways to go. So let's not compare it to that draft class quite yet.
You could compare the second pick in each draft, though, because it was Sam Bowie, who was the second pick in the 84 draft. He went to Portland.
Marvin Bagley.
They took him instead of Michael Jordan, and Marvin Bagley Jr. or Marvin Bagley III. Could be the Sam Bowie of that draft. You know who also was drafted in 1984 that wasn't all that bad? I think he's overrated as a player, but he's an all-time great. John Stockton, he was also in that draft. That was a pretty good draft.
Yeah, that was a good draft. So right now, we got the Clippers down 3-1 with the Suns leading that series. Game 5 is tonight, and the Bucks are up 2-1. Tomorrow will be Game 4 in that series. Sap, do you want to look ahead to tonight's game and just give a prediction real quick before we move on to the coaching hires and some of the rumors surrounding the league? All right, so like I said, it's Game 5 tonight in the Western Conference Finals. The Suns are going to look to wrap it up on their home court. They are favored by 5.5 points tonight. Sap, how do you see it playing out?
I think they'll win, but not cover. It seems like every game in this series comes down to a replay. Did the ball go off someone's fingernail? Did this guy hit a free throw? The Clippers have
how
had
much they've left
closing
in the tank.
That's the other
Clippers,
thing. The Clippers have nothing left. I mean, Paul George is exhausted at this point. He's carrying this team as much as he can. Now, we talked about his lack of efficiency, but that's been a problem throughout his career in the postseason. I think he's had 9 games in his postseason career where he shot 25% or less from the floor when taking 15 or more shots. I mean, that's disastrous, right? I mean, that's really bad. Not to mention missing free throws, which may have put the Clippers on top in games 2 and in games 4. I don't know if they have anything left, but I think they'll battle. I mean, they've got some guys on that team that are not going to give up. Your guy, Pat Beverly, is not giving up. I don't think Marcus Morris is going to give up. I don't think Paul George is going to give up. But I think at the end, Phoenix will just have enough to win the game, get to the finals for the first time in 28 years, first time for Chris Paul in his storied career. But I think it's going to be a close game. I'd say it's going to be like a 94-91 game. Maybe they'll score a little more than the other night, but it looks like another defensive game.
Yeah, I'll take Phoenix as well to wrap up the series tonight, which is almost a shame because I feel like the series should have gone more games than this because it's really been very close. And you'd like to see, these teams be more competitive. Obviously, it would be a completely different series with Kawhi Leonard involved. He's not right. So I think Phoenix will win, but I'm even though I'm rooting for Phoenix in the series, I'm rooting for the Clippers tonight. I'd like to see the series extended because I think that it deserves to play out a little bit more. And winning in 5 games looks like it was domination when really it's been anything but domination.
Even game 1 was close, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that was a close game.
Even game 1 was close. And game 2, the Clippers had it, and they snatched defeat from the jaws of victory, which, is as Clippers as it gets to lose a game like that. I mean, that's just the perfect definition of their franchise. So we will we'll see how this one goes. But, Sap, I agree with you that Phoenix will wrap up the series tonight. I will say that that 5.5 is like, I feel like that's right on the freaking money. I will say that they'll win by 6. So I'll take it just over that. Man, Vegas is good at what they do. That's a very intriguing spread. Yeah.
That's why they build those very, very big buildings.
That's like right where I think it's going to be. If there was a half point in the NBA, I feel like it would be exactly at 5.5 tonight. All right. So we both have Phoenix wrapping up the series tonight with Chris Paul heading to his first finals. We'll see how that goes. Sep, let's switch and go into news and rumor mode here, as these actually both fit in perfectly to each other because the Portland Trailblazers are involved in both news and rumors, as they've now hired a new head coach, Chauncey Billups, who was a favorite of both your and mine and is the Celtics coaching search. It seemed like he was their second choice maybe, but he was on their finalist list. A lot of people wanted Chauncey Billups. The Blazers ultimately land him 5 years is the contract, which is long for a first-time head coach. I was surprised by 5 years. But people in Portland not particularly happy about this. And I have, some boots on the ground in Portland, Sap. I have a lot of Blazers fans. I spent a lot of years in the Pacific Northwest in Oregon and, know some people in the know there. And basically what it comes down to is in 1997, Chauncey Billups and Ron Mercer, one of my favorite all-time Celtic players, shares the same birthday as me. I have an autographed picture of him. Were accused by a woman of rape. The charges were settled out of court, and that was basically the end of it until Chauncey Billups' name has come back up in coaching circles, and that's been talked about a little bit. And now that he has been hired by the Portland Trailblazers, there's a section of fans that are outraged at both the team and star player Dame Lillard, who endorsed Chauncey Billups to be the head coach. When he was asked who his favorites were for the coaching position, he said Chauncey Billups and Jason Kidd. We know Jason Kidd got hired by the Dallas Mavericks. So this move was apparently to, 1, appease Dame Lillard, and 2, people genuinely thought Chauncey Billups was one of the best candidates on the board. You and I thought that too. But the vitriol has gotten so bad that fans, I'm using quotation marks, are tweeting mean things at Damian Lillard saying, this is on you, like you ruined the franchise, essentially trying to run the guy out of town. It's a real mess in Blazers land right now for a team that already had a big offseason. So, Sap, what's your reaction to both the hiring of Chauncey Billups and the fallout of the hiring of Chauncey Billups?
Yeah, I mean, I like the hiring. I thought he was the best candidate. I wanted to see the Celtics hire him. I think he's going to be a fantastic head coach. Was it 4 years ago? He was on the precipice of being the president of basketball operations with the Cleveland Cavaliers. Then he decided not to. It just didn't work out. They weren't able to dot the I's, cross the T's, and he stayed in the broadcast booth where I thought he was very good at ESPN as an analyst in studio. And I think he's going to be a fantastic coach. Perfect guy to bring a guy who was a 5-time All-Star, a champion, Finals MVP, but a guy who was a real worker, a no-nonsense guy. I think he's going to be fantastic. Now, I don't even remember this case from 1997, and usually I have a pretty good memory of this stuff, but it resurfaced, which is problematic. But if everything was settled out of court, that does feel like almost like an admission of guilt, like, okay, we did something wrong. Here's X number of dollars. Be quiet. I get that. Portland's a very progressive city. You know that more than I do.
Yeah.
So there's going to be pushback for that type of thing. And now it kind of lands on the desk of Damian Lillard, because I don't think Damian Lillard was even aware of this, right? So he was like, yeah, Billups sounds like a great choice, or Jason Kidd. Like he probably didn't give it a lot of thought.
He was 6 years old, I believe, when that happened.
Right, yeah. So, I mean, unless he was a really, precocious kid following the news at 6, then I wouldn't have.
He had the Globe delivered to him every day.
Yeah, I mean,
growing up in Oakland.
Yeah, how old was I in 1997? I was 33. I barely remember. And I wasn't drinking anymore. It's not like I could use that as an excuse. So now he's getting all that blowback. And Blazers fans, be careful, because at this point, it maybe sounds like he wants out of there. He doesn't see any path to this team winning a championship. I don't think at all. I mean, like, what exactly can they give up to get something other than him? Is C.J. McCollum going to bring a lot back in return? Is Nurkic going to bring?
No, the best they could hope is that packaging McCollum and a lot of draft picks lands you a second star, but is Lillard and a second star enough to get past some of these other teams in the West? Probably not.
Yeah, look at Golden State, right? Next year when Clay comes back, are they going to land a player as good as Clay, provided Clay's healthy? Probably not. And Curry and Dame Lillard, you could just make the case that that's a cross, right? I mean,
right.
If Golden State play Portland in a series, you go, okay, Dame Lillard, Steph Curry, great players, they cancel each other off. Chances are Golden State's going to still have the second best player in that series.
Yeah, and then they have Draymond Green.
And you have Draymond Green. And you got Andrew Wiggins, who maybe you can move for something. And you got the 7th and the 14th pick in the draft. So, not to mention James Wiseman, who may be a nice piece going forward. So, yeah, I mean, that's a problem. So if Lillard maybe pushes the issue, and I know you've told me he's incredibly popular in Portland.
He's the most popular Blazer of all time.
Yeah, which is kind of weird, because Bill Walton did win a championship there, but Walton played so long ago that most fans now probably don't even remember him. Clyde Drexler was great there, lost twice in the finals. But
it's also his game, Sep. His game is so exciting.
It's exciting, and he's a smaller guy, right? The fans always like the 6'1", 6'2" guy. That's why Steph Curry's so popular. Like, how do you embrace Kareem Abdul-Jabbar?
Came out of Weber State, for crying out loud.
Yeah, he wasn't even heavily recruited coming out of high school. Yeah, he was, what was he, the 9th pick in the first round? And he seems like such an engaging guy, and he's embraced Portland, and Portland's embraced him. But you know what? He may just say it's time to move on. I've got to, go try to win a championship. Because at some point, players look at it and go, you know what? I've had a great career, but I want to win a championship. And it's not going to happen in Portland.
So how do you react, though, to the fans putting this on Lillard? Do you feel like that's completely unfair? Are you surprised? I'm surprised by it. The people I've talked to in Oregon knew there was going to be some blowback by some, sect of the fans, but didn't think it would get. It's getting ugly. Where to the point where they're out actively trying to blame Damian Lillard for this. When all he did was say, "I'd like this guy to be my coach." And again, whether he was aware of this or not, you are innocent until proven guilty in this country still. Maybe Chauncey Billups did, maybe he didn't. I don't know. But the way that we are legally supposed to interpret this is he's innocent.
Is the biggest issue here the city it happens in?
Yes.
Because it is Portland.
If it was Houston, not to disparage the Texas or Houston, it wouldn't be a big deal.
I don't even think it would be a big deal here. This is a pretty progressive city.
It's
the most progressive city. And, of course, we know what's been going on there for the last year with the issues with police and the rise in murders in the city.
Yeah, it's unique to Portland. But I think there would be a small, almost quiet piece of fans here that would make a difference. I'm not sure that they're Blazers fans necessarily, Sap, that are putting this on Lillard as much as activists.
It's more activists, yeah. Pick the local newspaper who, is the person that is the op-ed person that's going to write a piece and say, this is a terrible hire by the...
Yeah, their version of, what's her name? Shirley Long from the Globe?
Right, yeah, exactly, yeah. So there's going to be that.
But at the same time, Lillard's trait that he's been most celebrated for outside of his game, obviously, is his loyalty to Portland.
Yeah.
And now I think he's responding to these tweets because it's not like he's hearing it. He's not ignoring it. He's getting frustrated because he's saying, I've showed you guys so much loyalty and now you're stabbing me in the back for something I didn't really even do. He
wasn't part of the hiring process either. I mean, it wasn't like they said, Damian Lillard, you're going to pick the next head coach of the Portland Trailblazers. And he said, okay, give me Chauncey Billups. I mean, it's not that case. And he's one of the guys you want. Look, any player in the league probably looked at and said, yeah, Chauncey Billups.
Yeah, all he can do is endorse a guy. He's not making the final call.
No, it's way too sensitive on the part of the community in Portland. I think you're right. It's more than just fans. It's activists, and there may be some fans that are both. And look, if I'm Damian Lillard, I'm going to look, I've done everything I can here. They've never really made any moves to get better, right? Their big move a couple of years ago was bring in Carmelo Anthony. I mean,
yeah. What's Billups going to do here, Sap? I mean, this is very
tough
uncomfortable situation to walk into.
Of course it is, and now this best player is probably going to want out because that best player somewhat endorsed him as the coach.
So he's sort of set up to fail, Billups, in a lot of ways, which is not a great position to be in for your first head coaching job.
Well, what are you going to get back for Chauncey Billups? If that's the case, if Portland says we've got to rebuild here, what can you get back for Chauncey Billups? That's why I put that poll out there. Because
you mean for Lillard? For
Lillard. Billups probably can still play. I mean, he could be a player.
He might.
He's about 43, 44 years old. I think he may be. Is he about the same age as Tom Brady? So why not? For Damian Lillard. That's why I put that poll out. If you're the Celtics, would you trade Jaylen Brown, Marcus Smart, and a first-round pick for Damian Lillard at John Sapp 25? The easy answer for me is yes. And I love Jaylen Brown. Jaylen Brown's probably my favorite Celtic, one of my favorite players in the league, not just because of what he does on the court. I like what he does off the court. I respect the hell out of him. I think all of the social issues that he tackles, he is really well studied on, totally invested. It's authentic with Jaylen Brown. I love him. But Damian Lillard's a better player than Jaylen Brown. And I think at some point the Celtics are going to have to shit or get off the pot when it means going forward. You can only hold on to these two young guys for so long. Are you going to get a third piece by the time you do? Maybe one of those young guys is going to want to move on. Also, if you get Damian Lillard, I think you've got a better chance of adding a third piece maybe a year or two down the road in free agency. If you have Tatum, Lillard, and maybe an open slot more so than Tatum, Brown, so forth.
That's where I sort of disagree, Sap, is because in 2 years he's going to be 33 years old, and I don't know what his game is going to be like. He's 6'2". Yeah. Jaylen Brown is 25.
Yeah, they're 6 years apart. Jaylen Brown turns 25 in October, and Damian Lillard turns 31 in July. So they're 6 years apart. That's a major difference. Although Lillard's been incredibly durable.
No, Lillard's a better player. Nobody's arguing that. I mean, there's no argument to be made there. I just look at Brown. The 6 years is a big difference, and then throwing in a first, which I don't really care all that much about, and Marcus Smart. It's a lot to give up for a guy that I don't know how long his window of his playing at his peak is. And also, if I'm moving Brown, I need to be assured that the team is going to be in a position to win a championship based off of that move. Lillard and Tatum might be a little bit of a better team than Brown, but I still don't think it's good enough to beat Milwaukee or Brooklyn in the East.
Yeah, because if you match them up with Brooklyn and you say Lillard may not be as talented as Kyrie Irving, but he's certainly much more dependable, right?
Yes.
Tatum is not Kevin Durant, but he's a reasonable facsimile of. But then you don't have anybody to match up with James Harden. So, yeah, you do need a third piece. You're not winning a title unless you get a viable third piece. I think you can get one with Lillard and Tatum.
And then, but if you've also given Smart and a first-round pick, that also takes away some ammo to go out and trade for a third piece too. So I think that's, you're falling back. You're almost in the same hole that you're in right now. Just Lillard's a little bit better, but he's also older, and so your window is a little bit shorter.
Yeah, Lillard qualifies as a smaller guy, but he's like you said, 6'2". He's pretty sturdily built, though. I mean, he's not like Kemba Walker. Kemba Walker actually is sturdily built. I always look at Lillard as a bigger, better version of Kemba Walker. Right? He's just better, and he's bigger and more durable. He doesn't have any issues with his knee, so you're getting a much better player. I mean, if there was a perfect world, you get him without having to part with Jaylen Brown. But there's no way in hell you're getting Damian Lillard without parting with Jaylen Brown. Portland's not that stupid.
That's ultimately why I don't know what the trade is for Damian Lillard. Obviously, the Celtics would be interested, as every team would be interested, but because of his height and his age, it's not the easiest trade to facilitate because, teams, I think, especially seeing exactly what just happened with Kemba Walker, are going to be really gun shy on these guys, these older, 30 is not old, 31 is not old, but smaller guys who are on the wrong side of 30, whose window might not be that much longer open for.
Okay, let's take the Celtics out of the equation. You mentioned this several weeks ago. Philadelphia, Ben Simmons for Damian Lillard, but make it work with draft picks or other players. You put Damian Lillard with Joel Embiid, that's a pretty dynamic duo, right? That's a title contender.
Again, I don't know what they would need to do because Ben Simmons' value is so bad right now. It would have to be it would have to be a boatload of picks. And I don't know that any of those picks will necessarily be valuable for a couple of years because, again, you're talking about a title contender if it's Damian Lillard and Joel Embiid.
Yeah, Matisse Thybulle may be part of that equation, but you kind of want him as part of your building block as a really good defender, right? An ascending player. It's a difficult move. If Simmons didn't totally blow up in the playoffs, now not necessarily a one-for-one deal, but Simmons and some draft picks and maybe a bench player, maybe that could work for Damian Lillard. I think Ben Simmons would be perfect in Portland. I know it's got a fervent fan base, but it's a much more mellow place than, say, Philadelphia.
Yeah, it's just his value is so low right now. It's just they're not gonna trade their most popular player in franchise history for a guy who's looked at as like a huge reclamation project.
Well, that's the thing with Simmons, Jet. If a guy has like a knee, you can go and look at it, right? You can run an MRI and look at it and say, well, it's coming along fine. He's going to be healthy in 3 months.
Right.
With Ben Simmons, the problem with him is either in his brain or in his heart. Like, you can't rehab that stuff.
There's no way to know if he's going to end up getting better or not.
No, he just, man.
You're hoping. It's a hope trade, which is tough to sell.
Then you're hearing Ben Simmons to Minnesota. Like, Ben Simmons and Karl Anthony Towns on the same team. Man, neither one of those guys exactly, is
it'd be a very apathetic team.
Oh, man. Could you picture those two guys together? And then Anthony Edwards, who looks like a ball of energy, looks like he's got that attitude you want. And again, maybe Minnesota's in play for something because now they've got new ownership, right, with Alex
I'd like to see Ben Simmons go to the Heat so Jimmy Butler could strangle him.
Oh, that would be interesting, wouldn't it? Yeah, that would last.
You would hate him so much.
That would be like 11 minutes. Well, they already played together in Philadelphia, right?
I think it was a problem. Right,
that was probably the problem.
But Ben Simmons has gotten more apathetic since
he's
that time.
Way more apathetic now. He looked like, Russell Westbrook back then compared to what he is now. So that's a tough move. Philadelphia may just have to hold on to him and try to get him better and then see what happens next year and then maybe move him the following year. Is he going to get any worse than this? I don't know.
And before we wrap up, Steph, the other team you hear about is always in the mix for, Steph Curry, Damian Lillard, you hear the Lakers. But again, we've talked about this multiple times. They have zero mechanism to trade for a player.
They have nothing.
And to get Lillard, you'd have to trade for him. And the Blazers would never in a million years trade him to the Lakers. So take that out of the equation. They have nothing to offer. They have two outstanding players, neither of which they're trading. And then they have kind of a bunch of crap.
Now, the only thing something could work for the Lakers down the road is free agency. And we were going to touch on Kawhi maybe not being happy with the Clippers, but how can you tell? But if Kawhi decides to opt out with the Clippers, becomes a free agent, if he goes to the Lakers, they don't necessarily have the money. Could you ever see LeBron and Anthony Davis, redoing their contract to say, we'll give some money back?
Never
done it. And the reason he doesn't want to do it is because he's the best player in the league, and he doesn't want to give in because I think that would set the precedent that all of a sudden players are going to kick back money, and it's a players' league. Tim Duncan did, but Tim Duncan was just wired differently than everyone else. We know Brady.
It's a little different kicking back money to the Spurs versus the Lakers.
Right. The Lakers, one of their limited owners just put his 27% share of the team up for sale and is probably going to bring in about $1.5 million. Was it Michael Anshins, I believe, who owns Staples Center, and is just put up his 27% share of the Lakers.
Yeah, that's going to sell for crazy money, obviously. Yeah. I don't think LeBron will give money back because he never has. And I don't know that if it didn't work with the Clippers, I don't know that the Lakers are where Kawhi would necessarily want to go. He has issues with the medical staff of the Clippers. The Lakers just fired there. They never have a good medical staff there either. So
yeah, I mean, if he gets on the horn with Anthony Davis might say, "Don't come here. This place, they don't know what the hell they're doing." That's an issue I've had with the Celtics too. Their medical staff seems to be a little disjointed the last several years. Like, what the hell's going on with Kemba Walker? And we go all the way back to Garnett over a decade ago. So that's a big thing for players, right? They want to. I remember when Shaq went to Phoenix.
Phoenix has the best medical staff in the NBA. Yeah,
he said that's why he loved playing there. He said never felt better in his life. And if you're an owner of a team, why wouldn't you invest in that?
I don't understand. How do the Celtics not have the best one? They're freaking Boston. You have like the best doctors in the world here.
Yeah, I mean, just think about how many crazy contracts you give out to players. Like, are they going to re-sign Evan Fournier? And I know the money's different. It's part of it is the salary cap, and this is earmarked for salaries. But wouldn't you spend as much money as you could to embrace players and make sure that they have the best training facility and the best medical staff in the league? That's a big selling point. I don't get it. Some of these owners
this is the second team Kawhi has been upset with the medical staff.
Maybe it's Kawhi as much as anything else, because I can't even tell with Kawhi. He's up in the booth, really not clapping or blinking, but that's Did you
hear Mike Breen's call the other day? It was great. They panned to Kawhi. He said, Kawhi Leonard going crazy.
Yeah, this Kawhi just blinking like, his version of Morse code.
Mike Breen's excellent.
Oh my God, those three guys together are so good. Yeah, TNT pregame and postgame is the best, but in terms of a game crew, Breen, Jackson, and Van Gundy because Van Gundy and Jackson, you know what it is, Jet? I think the more I watch this stuff, I don't need necessarily polish as much. I almost like the feel of a radio show, and that's what TNT's pre and post game show feels like. Yeah. It feels like Ernie's the host, gets you in and out of breaks.
Well, they fight with each other. So
they fight with each other. Kenny Smith's more the analytical guy, less emotional, and then you got Shaq and Chuck just kind of having a blast at it, and it almost feels that way with the ESPN crew. You got Mike Breen, who's as good as it gets as a play-by-play guy, and you got Van Gundy, the former coach, Jackson, the former player. It's just a great
Who played dynamic. Under him, which is a great dynamic, too.
Played under him, yeah. And Jackson, I'll be honest with you, when Jackson came into the league, he became one of my favorite players. He was sensational. He was a sensational player, great passer, not a great shooter, but he hit a big shot, and he was a winner. I think he was a sensational player. And look, he laid the groundwork in Golden State, didn't work out, and then Steve Kerr took it from there, and we know what happened for 5 years.
Yeah, so it's a great broadcast, and we'll see how if this Kawhi Leonard situation deteriorates, if the Dame Lillard situation deteriorates, we'll have you covered on all the latest. We'll also let you know what happens in the Western Conference Finals tonight, if the Clippers can stay alive or if the Suns can wrap it up. If the Suns wrap it up tonight, Sapp, and Chris Paul goes to his first finals, I am immediately going on eBay and listing my Chris Paul rookie card and trying to make a bundle off of that. That's my plan.
Here's something we should talk about. If they win tonight, Chris Paul will be making his first trip to the NBA Finals. I've said many times, Chris Paul is the greatest player in league history to have never played in the NBA Finals. If he makes it this time around, who now gets that title? That'd be a good discussion point. Let's see if the Suns win
Probably
tonight.
Giannis for a couple of days before he.
Well, I'm talking about guys that have played their career pretty much already. Yeah, because then Giannis, if Giannis and Chris Paul make it to the finals, which I'm hoping for, because it'll feel like 1981 senior year in high school when the Bucks and Suns were my two favorite teams through high school. In 1981, I was so certain that the Suns and Bucks were going to meet in the NBA Finals. The Bucks lost in the second round of the East by 1 point in Game 7 at Philadelphia, and then Philadelphia lost Game 7 at Boston Garden by 1 point. Those three teams were separated by literally one bucket, and the Suns lost to a sub-500 Kansas City Omaha Kings. How's that for an old reference? Kansas City Omaha Kings in Game 7 in Phoenix. But that's what I wanted then, and that's what I want now. But yeah, I think that'd be an interesting discussion. Who becomes the greatest player in league history never to have played in the NBA Finals?
Yeah, we'll have that. We'll talk about it, I'm sure, in the next week.
Yeah.
We'll bring that up. It's a good topic for discussion. Make sure you check out Sapp's Twitter for all the latest poll questions. Vote no in his poll for if you would trade Jaylen Brown for Damian Lillard. I would say vote
yes.
No.
Time to shit and get off the pod, Jet. I'm tired of, he's
older. It's got to be the right player, Sapp. Got to be the right player.
Okay, Danny Ainge. Now you finally got a general manager that looks like he's not
I do it for Jokic. Is that fine? Brown for Jokic.
That would be interesting. Yeah, that would be. I mean, Jokic and Dame look, we're talking about two players that are top 10 in the NBA, right? We can agree that both Dame and Jokic are both top 10 players. And again, it would pain me to trade Jaylen Brown. I love him, but I don't know if he's reached the ceiling yet. I think at some point, I think Tatum will grow even more without Jaylen Brown because there's a lot of overlay with their games. And Dame, I think, would really enhance Jason Tatum's game. But, this is what makes the NBA incredible. We're in the conference finals, and we're talking about coaches getting hired and executives getting fired and players getting traded. Like in the NFL, let's not forget that, going into the Super Bowl, we had a major trade in the NFL, right? Jared Goff went from the Rams to Detroit for Matt Stafford. That was before the Super Bowl. It was like, holy crap, the NFL is starting to take after the NBA, making moves like during the postseason, while baseball, for the most part, does nothing in the offseason.
No, they just check players' gloves for whatever the hell they
and how
spider
stupid,
tech.
How stupid is was it Hector Santiago who got nailed?
Yeah.
Like, everybody's watching you. Why would you do it when everybody's watching you?
It's the same logic as the guys who are taking steroids and getting tested every week. It's like,
that's true too.
You're gonna get popped. They're coming in with the piss test, the blood test.
But at least my guys back then had the masking agents. That's why.
I'm saying more the more current guys. Like, wasn't there was like a minor leaguer who got popped 3 times? Like,
at some point,
it's stupid.
Yeah, if it's a 55-mile-an-hour zone, don't drive 95.
Like A-Rod got popped multiple times.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, come on.
Yeah.
But anyways, that's neither here nor there. At John Sapp 25 for his Twitter and his polls. Again, I'd advocate to vote no, but it's your decision. My Twitter is at Jet Stryer. We are the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sapp. We are presented by Full Press Coverage. You can find the show wherever podcasts are found or on YouTube at youtube.com/Jet Stryer. We will be back tomorrow. Talk to you then, everybody. See ya.